And this is Kathy Mason,
I'm Deepal Shah.
and we're so excited to introduce you to the beautiful work from Kimba Arem today on Awakening Beyond Life. Kimba is going to talk about using sound to reconnect to the higher worlds. And Kimba is a dear friend of mine. She's an international recording artist. She was featured on Dr. Andrew Weil's CDs as his sound healer. She's a molecular biologist and sound therapist. And I've been blessed to have sound therapy sessions with Kimba, and it's remarkable work. She had a near-death experience in 1992, and from that, she awakened to a way to blend science and this amazing capacity for sensing sound to help with healing. So, Kimba, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Kimba, let's talk about your journey to being aware of sound as a healer.
Yeah, I kind of see myself more like a messenger, actually.
Okay.
I am a Gemini, and I see Hermes or Thoth is Hermes, the messenger that goes between the worlds. It's kind of a shamanic journey, to have these experiences, and many people are having them these days, including with psychedelics and other intentionally created experiences. Deep meditation can do that. Drumming, there's many ways to do this, and that's been kind of my path in this life. Was when I was a kid, I always loved music. I was always very sensitive to everything, and music was my medicine. Like I would go, my parents would have a bunch of people over, and I'd go off and play the piano. And I just felt so at home with the sound. And I was trained in classical music, silver flute and classical piano, but I was such a shy person that I didn't want to be a performer, and that's the only context I knew of for music. So I went on to study molecular biology, pre-med, and I was just about to enter medical school in the last semester, and I had this near-death experience that at the time, it was in 1992, 33 years ago now, and I did not have any context for what happened. And to tell the whole story is very involved. Like we were discussing, Eben Alexander, he uses a whole book to tell his story. And so when I tell the story, I always, I need a good chunk of time to get into it myself and to share it, to honor it, because it's very difficult to put these experiences into words. And as a result of this experience, I was shown my future and my past, which is, I think the future thing is a little unusual as far as near-death experiences, because usually you have the life review, and part of that is it doesn't happen like a movie unplaying itself, like in real time. It's like you see it as an object, like your whole life in one, at least quantum reality, is what it is, and it's perfect. There's everything about your life and everything that's happened to you, bad, good, indifferent, is part of the perfection. And that's what's so transformative about these expanded states of consciousness that we can access through a near-death. Hopefully most people don't have to have a near-death experience to access this kind of eagle's perch view of your life and all of creation, really, but your piece in it, which is fractal and holographic and perfect. And so that's what really changes you, is like everything's perfect, and there's no exception to that. There is nothing that's not the creator, God, whatever we call it. We are all the one creator. And that resurrection of your perception to see that, it just changes you forever. But then you come back to the 3D world, and it's like, it's very difficult to reconcile everything's perfect when difficult things happen. You know, you get sick, people die. You know, this is a challenging realm. And that's what the Buddha said is like impermanence is, you know, the 3D world where this realm we're in is a very challenging place because things always change and they're impermanent and they decay and there's entropy and all of that. But it's a wonderful place to spiritually evolve. And there's many realms, you know, like the God realm and the Hungry Ghost, whatever that we call them. And you may not have the same opportunities. It's very rare and precious to have a human birth. And that's the big takeaway of the Buddha and many of the avatars who have seen this. And I got a glimpse of, oh, I get it now. You know, what all, you know, I hadn't studied as much spirituality at that time when I was 21, but for the last 33 years, everything I study, which has been voracious and ongoing, fits into this. And so, you know, how I think the near death, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me was it redirected my path toward remembering that I'm here for a purpose and that everybody is here for a purpose. Like we're each unique snowflakes that incarnate with it's not one thing. When you think of purpose, you know, dharma or purpose is multifaceted, but it's a unique expression of you. And there will never be another you. And the one thing that we each need to do is be the perfect you that you can be. The perfect, like each one of us is a snowflake, and there's no two snowflakes that have ever been created that are the same. And it's like that with us, we're each unique vibratory beings. So the key, literally the key, is finding your resonance of who you are. Like in Know Thesioten is know thyself over, you know, the Oracle of Delphi. It's like, what does knowing thyself mean? Means to just connect to who you are and radiate that. And it's so liberating, you know. And so for me, though, at 21, I was like, I thought I was going to be a doctor, and I had all this science, left brain training, and now I'm like a baby. And then so within about a couple months of that experience, I was pretty not in my body for about 4 years. My parents thought I was nuts, but Dr. Weil was at the U of A, and he helped me. That's the part of the story. But he kind of mentored me and directed me. And at that time, the didgeridoo came into my life. And when I first heard the didgeridoo, I was walking to organic chemistry. I was like, I got to graduate. I don't know why, but I'm just going to finish what I started. This was my final year of college. And, you know, I'm melting into trees on the way to organic chemistry, trying to like fit into this 3D matrix again. And this lady was sitting in the grass doing like hair wraps, you know, like a hippie. And she had this long wooden instrument next to her. And I never seen one or heard of the didgeridoo or anything before. And in fact, her partner, Alan Shockley, was the first didgeridoo maker in the United States. He'd been making them since the 80s or 90s out of a local agave. And I was just totally magnetized to this thing. And I walked up to her, I said, what is that? And she said, oh, it's a dream pipe, what he called them. I think referring to the dream time of the Aboriginals. And I said, play it for me. And she played it. And it was like the sound of that didgeridoo was like a key in a lock that connected me back to the higher worlds where I had just visited. You know, I think at birth, we come from the higher worlds, and when we're a baby, we're tripping out. We're not really in our bodies for a while. So it was like being a baby again. You know, it's like a total reset. But that sound, and the other thing is when you're, you know, 21 and you become a baby again, it's very disorienting. And you kind of, a lot of people who have near-death experiences, most of them that I've spoken with at least, say it's very hard to return here. And it's hard to reconcile where you've just been, this higher world, and here. But so I realized that my work was to find a way to stay connected to the higher worlds. And the didgeridoo became that for me, the sound of the didgeridoo. And mainly it was playing it. It was the the sound of it, but it was learning how to breathe. So the breath is, we all know pranayama is this ancient technique that has been many thousands of years old for expanding consciousness and healing the body. And so the didgeridoo is a very sophisticated form of pranayama. And it's the sound, it's the of creation. It's one note. So even though I had musical training, nobody needs musical training to play the didgeridoo. That's why I love to teach this as a self-healing tool in workshops, because it's just, it's just practice. This, how to use your breath. It's not difficult. It just takes practice. And the actual playing of the didgeridoo, I've been measured with like EEG, brainwave things while playing, and I actually go into gamma state while playing that. And apparently gamma is, I couldn't do gamma without playing, but while playing, my brainwaves just go there. So I don't know if it's the act of playing or it's the actual sound, but gamma is like meditators who have been meditating a long time have this gamma state that their brainwaves go into. And that's how I feel when I'm playing. It's like it does something to the consciousness that opens, it's like a key that opens a portal to the higher worlds. And so the didgeridoo has been used, it's the oldest instrument in the world. It was used by the Aboriginals for at least 150,000 years. And they didn't use it for entertainment. It wasn't a performance thing. It was a shamanic journey tool for connecting with the dream time, with the ancestors, where we go when we die, where we come from before we're born, and the higher worlds basically, and to connect to the earth too, which is it's got this kind of very Hermes, as above so below quality of very grounding, but also it's very full chakra. It's like it opens up. And that's what when I had this experience, I realized that not only was I not using my breath fully, but I wasn't really in my body, not just from the near death, but most of my life, I hadn't really fully incarnated. And, when I moved to Hawaii shortly after that in the late 90s, where I am now, they call white people haole, but it really means haole, which means without breath. That's how it's actually pronounced. Ha is the breath and ole is without. So it is true that it's kind of a derogatory term, but it is true that most of us do not use our full breath capacity. And our breath in every language besides English is the same word as spirit. They're not different words. So if you're not breathing in your spirit into your body, you're not really showing up fully incarnated. And then for me, that was how I found my life's purpose, was like, okay, I need to show up fully into my body, and then I can find who I am and what's my unique purpose in the world. Like, what is my sharing? For me, it ended up being sound and music and all of that. But that's my whole life. I've been a musician, and that's always, some people are just, I have a lot of musicians in my lineage too. So I don't know how much of that is just partly inherited from our star lineage or wherever. But I think anybody can use these techniques, just the sound, the breath. I'd like to speak to the sound of creation, which is the next stage of what the near-death experience brought into my life. But that is a way for people to follow their unique vibratory expression in this world and find what it is and stay connected to the higher worlds, or we could say our higher self. I was shown in the experience. I also have a diagram. I wanted to see this Kabbalah image. This is from Drunvalo's book, The Tree of Life, Flower of Life. This is the Tree of Life. And in my experience, I felt like this was a really good map of what I experienced during the course of that evening. Was like it in the Kabbalah, they talk about this bottom one is Malkut, which is earth. And this is the top of the tree, which is the Ein, or the Ein Sof, or the Ein Sof Or. And these are all layers of the higher worlds, right? And this is a multidimensional 3D and beyond image, but we're looking at it in 2D. And it gave me like this, I had seen it before, but I don't really kind of understand what they were alluding to, is that, our consciousness can open up portals and travel up. And I think the center, for me, that was like the Shushumna and the spine and the didgeridoo of playing this, using the breath and the sound and opening up my chakras. And it opens up the consciousness so we can take a peek into these higher worlds. And when we die, there is a possibility that we don't, the Egyptians and the Buddhists talk about, we don't reincarnate back into earth plane unconsciously. We can actually ascend and move to the higher dimensions or the higher worlds. And eventually, maybe someday we merge back into the source and we don't take on any form. But there's many like grades that I think of us as in like spiritual kindergarten here on earth. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, that gave me a framework for, what happened during the stages of that near-death experience. And there were layers to it. And all I wanted to do when I came back was to be able to convey this experience. And the only way I was able to was with the sound of the didgeridoo. That was like the closest I could come. I wanted to use words and tell the story, and it was just not cutting it. And for some reason, if I can play and entrain to the sound and actually in my own consciousness go there while I'm playing, I think that it can touch people on this like nonverbal level, kind of beyond the mind, of they get a little taste of what that is. And I think that's one of the purposes of the use of the didgeridoo.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to bring us back on for a second. So I have known you a long time, and I have been always so impressed with how elegantly you share those frequencies, whether it's from the didgeridoo, the crystal didge, or when you present, because I see you as mirroring the higher realms in the earth plane. And as a sensitive, and I think a lot of people right now that are waking up are becoming sensitive. I guess I was out of my body most of my life. It wasn't safe here. And as soon as there was any conflict or any fear that popped up at all, I was out of here and just sort of robotically existing. And what you've done, in my experience, is make it safe and I want to use the word elegant for the way that you walk this earth, because you give us a model of still using your brain, not reducing your capacity to be an intelligent human, but creating a sensitive, emotional connection with the audience so that their feelings are enhanced and possibly healed during it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I think, and the next, what the meta picture of that was what you just described, is that's what I hope for humanity as we're evolving and we're moving into the higher worlds. The whole planet is, apparently. And I don't know if there's a timeline split. Some of us go this way, some this way. But in any case, those of us who are on this trajectory of ascension and moving to the higher worlds, it's like I do feel that shared. I've heard this term more recently with the telepathy tapes and the autistic kids. Now they're being able to communicate with them. I work with your kids with sound, and it's like, oh my God, I want to learn from them. But they live in this shared consciousness. And so some of the layers of the near death were absolutely involving what I think these kids are describing. They call this place the hill. And I really want to investigate this more now. It's kind of new to me, this understanding of what the autistic kids are experiencing, but they live in shared consciousness, and they can meet up in this place where some of the people there are other autistic kids who are anywhere on the planet. Right. And some of the people who are on the hill, they call it, are apparently not incarnated, they're like higher beings that come and teach them, and they learn there. They learn at night. Some of them, they're like in school, and it's like that happened in one of the stages of my near-death experience. That describes one of the layers. And I was like, when I heard that in the telepathy tapes, I'm like, did I go to the hill or one layer of it? And I actually think that that's where we are moving into. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but we're moving into shared consciousness. And so part of my work that just synchronistically came out, all of my work, I follow synchronicity since my near death, because that works so much better if I just listen to spirit and like, okay, what do I do now? And then this is next. But the sound circles and all the stuff that you were referring to is, I think the goal of that is shared consciousness. Like when you, especially the didgeridoo, because it's one note and everybody's in training, but people are doing this with crystal bowls. You don't have to play the didgeridoo. It can be, you know, and music in general can do that. But if it's encoded with intention and the player, the creator, or the creators of the music are connected to the higher worlds while being a messenger of the sound, that and this is what I think the ancient role of musicians always used to be. It wasn't for entertainment, at least mostly. I think music has been used for since the beginning of time to connect us to the higher worlds, and the musicians were the ministers, which are supposed to be mediators, you know, not like, look at me, I'm so great, but I just learned the technique, or I've been ordained to deliver a message. And you know, playing the didgeridoo is technical, but it's also just making your ego thin enough where you're not trying to do something. You're not trying to be somebody. You're just expressing your passion, and hopefully encoded with the prayer for the benefit of all, which is really good for making the ego thinner. Just really simple techniques that anybody can use, even playing a crystal bowl. You know, but for me, the didgeridoo has been one of the main instruments because it's just one note. And I have shared in the series Sound of Creation, because it's so profound to me that Socrates and Plato and all the ancient philosophers who are really into sound talked about the monochord. And they said, study the monochord and you will learn the secrets of creation. And I heard that in high school in philosophy class. It always stuck with me. And it wasn't until like so many years later, and I'm playing the didgeridoo, and I'm like, the didgeridoo is a monochord. It's one note. Wow. Within that one note is an infinite number of harmonics, and they describe it as like the universe is a monochord. We could say it's the one, or the Tao, and then the Tao breaks into the 10,000 things. It's the top of the tree, right? This is where we all come from. And then the Trinity, and then all the lower worlds, you know, layers, dimensional layers encoded, they're nested within each other. And then we're here now, but all the other higher dimensions we're nested within them, but they're all one monochord. It's a fractal of the universe, it's holographic. And that a wake up is the recognition that you are the creator. And but there's another piece to that. So is everybody and everything else. So you can't miss that piece when you wake up to the fact that you are God, you are the creator, because then it gets weird if you don't recognize that every plant, every animal, every mineral, water, every person, they are the creator too. You know, and so the didgeridoo, to me, studying it for 33 years now, is teaching me, I think, the secrets of creation. It's just by playing it, just by studying the harmonics, your breath, your shushumna, which is the central channel. That here's the one of the crystal early models that I showed you guys of the crystal didge. And to me, this is just like the shushumna, which is the central channel in your body, right? And the which is, you know, connects all your chakras. And when that is flowing, it goes out the crown of your head and connects you to the higher worlds. And the Ida and Pingala are the sun and moon. And so these channels of breathing is how you breathe, circular breathing. So, but people can do this, like I said, with pranayama or other techniques. But what I think the next takeaway that I wanted to touch on was, you know, the inception of the Sound of Creation series. Why I called it Sound of Creation is actually my first album I made in the 90s was called Creation's Tone. And I was thinking about the didgeridoo at that time, but it wasn't until July 4th, 2013. Remember, you introduced me to Kiara Windwriter, and we had all these synchronicities. It was so crazy. The Lion Path, all this stuff on Egyptian ascension teachings, and we did an exchange. He loved the didgeridoo, and so I did a sound session with him, and he did his work in my fields, and it triggered this sound. And I said to him, "I'm hearing a sound," and he said, "Oh, it's the sound of the silence," or something like that. He didn't say anything else, and I was like, "Okay." And to me, it sounds like a didgeridoo, but it's like way higher, but it's way above the hearing range. You hear it with your ears plugged or whatever. But it started then. So it wasn't just like some random thing. It was very activated something, and it never stopped. And that was since 2013. And the first few months were very challenging. I was having like entrainment issues to it because I was twitches and I was having trouble sleeping. It was really loud. And then I started to meet people, more synchronicities, who are in the Kundalini yoga. I've always been in different kinds of yoga, like over the years, guided to different styles. But the next chapter was, I had been into Ashtanga before that. Now I'm into Kundalini, and they're all about the nod. And the nod, that's why they're always playing music in the classes, because their lineage teaching from India is that there is a sound that you can learn to perceive that is the sound of Brahma, the all creator, that we are all part of. We are all the one creator. And for years and have teachings on how to perceive it at all. For me, I think playing the didgeridoo opened what I call the third ear. And it is taught that if you open your throat chakra, which it definitely did for me, my throat chakra was always probably very closed as a kid. I was very shy, would never, be in front of people or speak in front of people or whatever. Not that I like it more. It's just, I'm more okay with it. I'm not an extrovert. But once you open the throat chakra of Vishuddha, it opens your perception to perceive sounds above and below the hearing range. And like ajna, if you open your ajna, you start to see things, auras and stuff. So, but my path has always been sound. So that's, I'm more auditory than visual oriented. So the sound, once you perceive it, it's actually a tool for evolution. And there are books that I found, and there's not many, but I have kept a list of them, and I can refer people to them. And they are in the presentation that I'll mention later, that I did a PowerPoint on all my research compiled on this topic. And it is talked about in the Sound of Creation series on how to work with the sound. I think a lot of people I'm finding come to me, they've been pathologized. They call it tinnitus. And I think that tinnitus or tinnitus in many people might be a sign that some part of their spiritual activation is underway. But they don't realize it. Even me, who was on a spiritual path, working with sound, I didn't know what it was. But fortunately, I was guided to understand it through all the synchronicities. And then I felt, okay, now I'm supposed to be a messenger for this information. So I started to study it. And it's with me all the time. And it's become kind of like my ally. And that's what it's supposed to. It's a great gift to be able to perceive this sound. But then once people hear it, they don't know what to do with it, because the teachings on how to work with the sound are not just out there. So part of what I'm working on too, and also I want to put more in second series, Sound of Creation, is more of the tools that people can use to work with it. Because spiritual awakening can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's not just a walk in the park, and it doesn't have to be, it can be with ease and grace. And that's, my prayer, that we're leaving the crucifixion era where we have to suffer to evolve. We actually don't need to suffer to evolve. In the new world, we have memories and imprinted of that. That's how we grow. And I'm not free of that, but I definitely want to move past that. And for all of us, that we can use these tools to gracefully move into the higher worlds. I feel like it's kind of a midwiving tool for a spiritual planetary awakening. One of them, breath, sound, all of the really basic stuff that you don't have to be a musician. You don't have to have a lot of money or anything to to do this work. You just need the information,
Right.
you know, and even this topic, which is so central to every esoteric lineage I've ever come across, it's not just laid out there what it is, what to do with it. And a lot of it is because it was very hidden. You know, it was saved for adepts and people who were on the spiritual path, you know, like other teachings were. So, and some of it was never written down. So, you know, oral traditions was a big part of human history. We had much better memories, probably. And, you know, we could actually, you know, and we would tell stories and convey, and it was a living transmission. So now what we have written down and which books weren't hidden or destroyed, you know, not available to the public, all of that. So we're resurrecting that because in the field, and I believe this is another important thing, the field of sound that the didgeridoo taps into, the dream time, or the sound of creation, which I feel the didgeridoo is a fractal of, a harmonic of the sound of creation. It's kind of like, I feel it's maybe like the Akashic, like there is information in the field of sound. And the Gnostics were all about this, direct knowledge. You don't need to learn from a person or book. You can learn the techniques to connect directly to the source of information. And that's what I feel the didgeridoo has been teaching me. So when I play, it's like I'm uploading, even it's hard to put into words, just not knowing things over the years. And also how to play the didgeridoo. Like I teach workshops for 30 years now on playing the didgeridoo, maybe 25 years. And I always tell people, I'm going to give you techniques, we'll make the instruments, but really just create the fundamental tone, and you tapping into the sound will teach you. And you're not going to master it right away. I mean, it takes lots of practice, but like anything. But it doesn't matter. You don't have to be masterful at something to get the benefits from it. You know, like I was getting the benefits from it from the first day I started playing. And I couldn't circular breathe and do all that, you know. And so there is something to the new era we've just entered. The Toltecs say we just entered the sixth sun, which is a huge cycle. 2021 was the official beginning of the sixth sun, which is a 6,625-year cycle where we access information from within. The fifth sun, which we just left, and the Hopis talk about suns as well, but the fifth sun was where we access, it was a sun of light, where we access sun information from the outside. The sun of darkness, which isn't a negative term, it's just the yin and yang of time in the 3D, is where we access information from within. You know, so I think we can share information with each other, but I feel that the shared consciousness is most important for us to understand and move into, because that's where the real information base. Every single person holds so much wisdom and experience and knowledge, not just from this life, but all the multiple lives we're connected to, parallel lives, past, whatever we call them. So imagine if we were hooked up together through the internet, the shared consciousness of the internet. I mean, we can use the internet as a tool, but it's a stepping stone. The technology is a bridge. It's the way. It's a stepping stone to shared consciousness. And that's what I feel like the big takeaway of my near-death experience was having a taste of that and seeing that that's what we want. That's the second coming. It's heaven on earth. It's as above, so below. It's on earth as it is in heaven. All of these like aphorisms, spiritual aphorisms, they are on the trajectory we're on. But in a way, we have to build it. We build the path to the higher worlds, but we build it by building a bridge in ourselves to it, by doing this spiritual work. So each person that's working on themselves, they don't have to be, you know, out there in the public talking and presenting, just meditating at home, doing their, every single one of us is a fractal of the creator, no matter how visible we are in the world. You know, and I think that's the other thing that we need to get over is like, don't try to be like somebody else or want to be like anything other than who you are, because you are the note in the symphony of creation that needs to play your note perfectly. And if everybody plays their note perfectly, then we have this beautiful symphony of humanity working symbiotically, creating heaven on earth, cleaning up the planet, sharing resources, you know, like the earth is already doing, is already there. Sharing symbiosis is, it's not Darwin, dog eat dog, survival of the fittest. That was never the case. It was the misinformation. The survival of the most symbiotic is how the planet works. And we need to bridge ourselves into the symbiotic Gaian supermind, the web of life, by us becoming more telepathic, using our sight powers, or learning how to wake up these dormant faculties. And, for me, the sound has been my guide through all of it. And I think it can be for a lot of people, including the sound that people are hearing, not pathologizing spiritual awakening, which has been done for a very long time. And that needs to end.
I've been hearing a very high pitch sound. I am hearing it right now. I've been hearing it for like 3 months now.
Oh, wow.
And, oh yeah, and it's sort of like, oh, there it is again, my friend.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm being like I'm an antenna, and I'm being tuned so I can bring in new information.
Yeah.
So I really relate to that your whole expression of that.
Yeah. And you saw the video I did on it, right?
Yeah.
On the sound. Okay, good. Because that goes into more detail. But the other thing I'm studying is with the sound is sometimes there's a background sound that I think is the nod, the laudable life stream, what all the ancients talked about. And then sometimes there's these other sounds that come and go. Like just what happened just a minute ago that was really loud. It just one ear. And people talk about this. I've heard people talk about this. So I think there's more depth to this topic. It's not just any sound you hear is the sound of creation. It's like, I think the sound creation is always there. It's like the background radiation, the Big Bang created this background radiation. Actually, the Big Bang is happening. It didn't just happen. It's happening all the time. And Nassim talks about the space.
Yeah, and the black holes in each cell.
And the torus, that could be making a sound that is this creation. Like we are emerging, like we are mostly empty space. Our bodies are not really solid. And we don't only exist in 3D, actually, especially our soul, our consciousness. Definitely, like people who have near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, we know we are not the body. The body is part of us, but it's a temporary experience, but we are not the body. But so we're emerging from the spiritual realm into the physical, but going back and forth. And so are our atoms. They're going in and out of the higher worlds. So could that movement into creation and back out creates, it is a movement. So isn't that what sound is? It's a wave, right? It's a movement. It's spiraling. So it's like creation is happening, but then there's other, like, sometimes I wonder if there's like a strong EMF field, that someone's exposed to, that, or there's some broadcast. There could be other sounds within the field that we hear that are above or below, mostly above the hearing range, because you hear them not with your ears. They sound like a sound, but you're not hearing it with your ears, because if you plug your ears, it's just as loud. So it's definitely not, it seems like a sound. It's very strange. But so I just want to put that in there, that like, if you do hear a sound that's there, and then you start to hear other sounds, try to focus on the background, the sound. It's usually the most crystalline one, or the one that's most constant, that doesn't change. And when I first started to hear it, it's like I realized it was always there. I just never recognized it. It was so weird. It was like the sound, I've been in this sound like a fish in water. You don't realize it because you're in it. But then once you become aware of it, it's hard to not focus on it. And especially if you don't want to tune it out. Most people think it's a problem, so they want to tune it out. But the teachings are not that. They teach you how to work with it. And part of it, I'll just say here, is like, pay attention to it and do it while you're talking, while you're, eventually while you're sleeping. But, that's a little more difficult unless you're a good lucid dreamer. I did it once in all these years. That's challenging, to pay attention to the sound while you're sleeping. But, while you're eating, while you're watching something, that's one of the teachings is, and what I think is behind that, and I'm still a student of this and I'm still learning more, but I think we're in training. So entrainment is term we use in the world of sound of, you know, two things harmonizing and vibrating together. Like women who live together start to menstruate together because they get in this similar, or we're in training with the lunar cycles as women, and then with each other hormonally, and you know, the tides, and there's or two tuning forks resonating with each other. You know, that's an entrainment process. So when you hear something and you're dancing to it, you know, you're entraining to the music. So it's happening all the time, you know. But like, let's say someone's mowing the lawn outside and it's really, you know, loud, but then eventually we might tune it out, but it's still there, you know. So we're in training to that. But I think that the purpose of paying attention to the nod or the sound of creation or this whatever we call it is to entrain yourself to it, because it's your ticket to the higher worlds. And what they teach is that when you die, that you can follow that thread back home. So it's actually, and I that makes sense to me, because when I had my near death experience, that's why the didgeridoo was so important to me, because it was that sound. It was the closest sound that I could find that was what I experienced. That was my thread, like Jacob's ladder to the higher worlds. You know, it wasn't exactly, but it was closest on earth, even now. That and then, you know, Robert Monroe, he has like you know, teaching people how to do out of body stuff, and he created some CDs to help people. You know, he understood that sound was a trigger for some people to have astral travel experiences or journeying out of their body. So there is something that, you know, you hear, or some people who take ketamine and they start to dissociate. You know what ketamine does? It's a dissociative anesthetic. You'll hear this sound, and there's this, you're leaving your body a little bit. I mean, if you take enough, you will leave, but you probably pass out, though. You won't remember it necessarily if you take too much, but there's a sound. So what is that? Why is the sound? It's like this umbilical cord to the higher worlds, you know?
Yeah, I want to think that it's actually a way for us to activate the other senses that are dormant for us, because I feel like that's, it used to be I'd get a download in my right ear and I go, incoming, you know, and then it would take a week to process. I was always like impatient. I want to know what they just said now. But now it's that and everything else. So I feel like as humans, we're evolving to be more than six senses, many multiple senses more, that were part of our heritage, really. So it's just waking back up. But I want to make sure, Deepo, did you want to ask Kimba a question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so fascinated by your entire message and everything that you shared, and I totally resonate with it because, you know, I know pranayama, like that's what I grew up with. And, you know, the Shushumna, the Pingala, the Ida, you know, all of the nadis and how we balance ourselves and our body. And the didgeridoo, I have actually experienced that once in my life. And it was very, very powerful. Now, as we bring sound into our life, now there's a difference between music therapy and sound healing, right? Like what's, you know, I'm going back to the simple, you know, question, because I think a lot of people use music therapy and then a lot of people use sound healing, but there's a difference. Can you share a little bit about that?
The difference between music
Like
therapy.
sound healing and music therapy, is there a difference there?
Well, I think that our words for it is in modern times is kind of is how we define our terms, really. Because, like, I think the ancient people were just using sound how they understood it to be, was, you know, for shamanic journeying, for healing work, for connecting the tribe in communal things, for, personal journeying to the higher worlds. I think that what's happened, what I've seen in the last like 30 years, is that music as medicine has become more mainstream. Like when I got into it, nobody was doing it.
Exactly.
Like this was in the early 90s. And I mean, I'm sure there were some people, but it wasn't like a big thing. And then, so as it's gone more popular, their schools have formed. So people, and then they put a curriculum together, but they're just putting it together. It's not like, thousands of years old lineage that they inherited of the teachings. They're just putting it together, and then people can go through a program and get a certification now in their school if they pay this money, and now they have certificates so that they're a music therapist. But if you don't do that and you just are doing it, then you're a sound therapist, because the name music therapy has, I mean, this is my current understanding, because I think nobody really has the answer actually, but it's like, that's the Western way, is we want to quantify things. We want to put things in boxes. We want to have certificates. But it is good to, know that people have done their homework, and that, but I never felt called to get a degree in music therapy, because I've been a musician since age 7, and playing music and doing it for almost 50 years, my whole life. And it hasn't really, so I don't know if I could call myself now a music therapist, because I don't have a degree from somebody who put together an organization. But I don't know if there's a big difference. Like there might be programs that they put together, like based on like classical music, modal scales, and, certain technical thing that they do with, certain neurological diseases or autistic kids. And, my path, and I think a lot of the people are more like, you're following your intuition. It's more of a shamanic path. It's not necessarily an accredited one. And some people want to do that, and they do both. But, it's really, I hope I'm answering your question, but my feeling is like, it's kind of how we define our terms.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thought that maybe sound was a little bit deeper than just music, like I thought that maybe there was a difference.
Well, one of the things that I am going to focus on probably in the first episode of Sound Creation too, is defining our terms. Because, and Ibrahim Karim has an interesting take on, resonance versus frequency versus sound versus, we use all these words interchangeably, but they mean slightly different things, and some of them mean the same thing. But like when we think of sound, you could say like heavy metal is music, but to some people it's noise. It's not music, it's sound, but is sound audible? So I call the sound of creation what I hear, but is sound in the 20 to 20,000 hertz range? How do we define sound? Or should we call it frequency? Should we call it resonance? So this is getting a little technical, and part of it is the Babylon. When we left telepathy and we had to use language, and English is it's always been a frustrating language for me. That's why I loved music, because it just seems so limited, especially when I had my near death. It's like I wanted to share what happened, and I had no language. Maybe if I grew up speaking, Sanskrit or Aramaic, I would be able to. Now I learned some Aramaic, and I know some Sanskrit chants, but it's not the same as like, how do you convey? So that's why I'm into this telepathic communication, shared consciousness, because that's what I experienced, not only in the near death, but for a few years afterwards. I had some very powerful experiences when I wasn't back in my body yet. And I was like, this is the way to communicate, but it just, I had no control over it. It just happened in certain contexts, like with certain, those are stories, but it's like so powerful. It changes you forever that we can actually communicate this way. And we don't have to get caught up in language and how we define our terms. And that's what separates us. It can, language can connect us, but it can really separate us. So how we define things is going to be different in different cultures and in our different definitions. So what I'd like to do is kind of like outline at least how we're going to use these words. Like, what is frequency? What is resonance? What are harmonics? What is sound? What is, all the different terms.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Kimbo, you just mentioned the Sound of Creation on Gaia TV. Could you share a little bit more about that for us as we wrap up?
So it's a 10-part series that you can watch, I think a couple episodes free on my website, which are linked to, in my website has lots of clips from the series, shorter clips and whole episodes. But each episode goes into, a whole world of sound. They're each 30-minute episodes. It came out a couple years ago. And I mean, it was kind of after many years of being on this path, it was just, time to produce something like that. And all the things fell into place. And that was right when the lockdown happened and my dad passed. And I was just for a whole year, I just dove into this project, at least the outline. And then the next 2 years of creating it, 2 years. And, it's just got, covers all the bases. We have a whole episode on like how the ancient sites like pyramids and all the stone, that we can't even create today, how they were created, likely using consciousness and sound. A whole episode on that, the pyramids and all that. And then one on, sound of nature and the human body and how all of the harmonics are encoded in that, and the planetary sounds. And I mean, it's just like, it's a lot of content in the 10 episodes, but each episode goes into another facet. And the second series, I wanted to go more metaphysical because I couldn't go there in the first series because we had so much basis to cover. So the next series is going to be really far out, as far as like the higher world connection more, because that's what I've always been more passionate about, that because that's where I realized is my goal in this life. I want to graduate and this world, and these are the tools that we gave ourselves and passed down through all of our generations to help us through these major shifts that our species was meant to undergo. And now is the time to pull out all of this information and apply it, resurrect ourselves, as
yes,
we are birthing. And I think that we're meant to be midwives. I'm meant to be one of the many midwives to facilitate this process and go through it myself. I'm part of the thing. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to save all you mortals. I don't at all have that experience. But I mean, through being a messenger, I get a taste of the higher worlds. And then like, this is it, you guys, come on. There's this real, these worlds are there for us to connect to in a way to do that.
I also want to recommend the Secret of Water video that Kimba did. I don't know if you did the whole video or the soundtrack or what, but that's a fantastic film that's on Gaia TV as well.
Yeah, Yerk and I did that together and with the Gaia team, and I scored it.
Yeah.
And so it's the age of Aquarius. I think sound and water and all of these things are becoming very topics of big interest for people right now.
Well, I think they're paths to wholeness. And that's what the yearning is for most people. And again, I just appreciate so much you. I know you're shy, and I know I have to usually ask you multiple times to do stuff. So thank you so much for doing. You said yes, and I appreciate so much for you to do this for us, because we really want people to understand that there's an awakening path for them that is full of hope and full of a bright future. And just by listening to your passion for the path that you found after your I don't know, it's an awakening crash, that everyone's having their own version of that. Yeah. Maybe not through a near-death experience, but a spiritually transformative experience or a death of a loved one that's causing them to reevaluate their lives. So your passion for music and the path to wellness through it is so helpful. Thank you, Kimba, so much.
Oh, I agree. I agree, Kimba. Everything that you've shared and everything that you've done, I mean, it gives us so much more hope, that we don't have to have a near-death experience, but we can experience so many other, so much depth of consciousness through simple things in life. It's coming back to simplicity. And so thank you so much for sharing you.
Oh, it's such an honor. Yeah.
Thank you. And you're so humble with you are just a superstar in my view. So you're so humble about all your amazing accomplishments. And I hope people will go to your website and check out your music, which is fabulous. And then check out all the other projects that you work on. And then you'll have a new Kimba Arem fan club. So I'm proud. Well, I'm president.
I encourage, people are welcome to email me with, questions, okay. Especially, I get a lot of emails about the sound because people are like, oh my God, this is not a problem. That's like a huge thing for, I think, a growing number of people. And I'm really passionate about getting this information out, that reframing people's spiritual experience that they don't realize is, and people can be on a spiritual path or not. I mean, everyone is on a spiritual path. It's just some of us are more aware of it, because of whatever. And so that people are welcome to email me at my, Kimba at my website.
Right. I'll put that all in the description for you.
Direct them to, on my video page where I have all our interviews, over the years. It's like the fourth one down, but I can, direct people to the one that's specifically on the PowerPoint presentation if they want to see that one. Because it might be, there's like 30 videos on there. So it's like the fourth one down, but I can direct people to go to that one if they want to see that one on the Audible live stream. Fantastic. That's got all the information and also books that they can reference for techniques and how to.
Kimba's a voracious reader, so every time we're together, we talk about books. So anyway, well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you so much, Kimba, and bless the work you do. Bless everything. And thank you, Deepal, for doing this with me. I really hope we're helping so many people with their journey to wholeness.